reading about you, and
Uh-huh.
I had seen, well, I guess there were three interesting data points where I just went, young Bobby Thurman, the Phillips Exeter Academy, Fidel Castro. I just went, I wonder if he could connect those dots for me. That was quite quirky.
Well, I was into Latin culture at Phillips Exeter, in addition to all kinds of other things. But many of my good friends were Latin American, and they were from different, very wealthy, powerful families in Latin America, of course, at Phillips Exeter. But they themselves were having their rebellions, mentally anyway. And I don't think, very few of them, I think, followed through to make any real rebellion. But there's one friend of mine, Jorge Enriquez, was from a very right-wing Mexican family and very wanted to be more or less rebellious. And we would read poetry of Latin American poets. And at some stage during the spring of the senior year, when in a way we'd done everything, we'd gotten into college, we'd finished more or less, there were a few games left, lacrosse games and things. But we sort of done everything, and it was that idle time and also probably hormonal time. 17 years of age, I was, and some guy brought in a book of Fidel Castro's poems. And, up in the Sierra Maestre, waiting for the revolution to finish, and etc. And it was kind of romantic, and then we got into a banter of like, well, you wouldn't do anything for this guy, you guys are the oppressors, and back and forth. And then finally, Enriquez and I just took off to join the Revolutionary Army. Not really too seriously, and the ideas of justice and freedom and artistry and whatever, and and I remember around the time feeling that kind of like a tunnel closing in on me, which involved maybe being in the government or being in the CIA or being in the business or corporation or something, and the American oppressive role in Latin America, and being part of the WASP dominant group. And I didn't like it, and so I guess that fueled it, and we went off, and we were refused, our recruitment was refused. And so then we went back to Phillips Exeter, and they wouldn't accept us back to graduate, even though we were presidents of things and sort of pretty central students. We were good students who admitted on merit scholarships to places. But unless we would say we were temporarily crazy. We had gone temporarily insane, unless we would put that on paper at the infirmary, and which we refused to do, so we were then thrown out. But I got into Harvard anyway, because I had advanced standing by 2 years or something. I had like 5 years of college math. I don't know what it was. They made me wait a year, but I still kept my place at Harvard. And and they told me to go and get a high school diploma or join the army or do something like to show stability during the year, which I didn't do. I went off and lived in Mexico for a year. And but then they said, well, we better let you in anyway, or you'll go to waste, which might have been true. Who knows? So that's one data point.
Okay.
Wasn't anything too serious. Didn't have any sense of him as a stogie-chomping, green uniform-wearing communist. Didn't even know what it was, probably. But just something romantic about him seeking liberty and justice for people, that kind of thing, Fidel Castro.
So how far did you actually get down into your...
Excuse me?
Did you actually get to Cuba itself?
We got to Miami Beach,
Okay.
where they were recruiting mercenaries. And they just laughed when they saw us, even though we were packing pistols, which people had pulled out from under their beds in dorms, illegal firearms and things, and we hauled those down with us. And so we were trying to look like we were very ready to roll, but they just laughed. And actually, they wanted my Mexican friend to go to back to Mexico and borrow a couple of the big ranches of his right-wing family, because they knew the family. And they thought they had a liberal in the family, and that they could do some training on the ranches, because they did a lot of training of their troops in Veracruz and places like that. So they tried to recruit him in that sense, and they just told me to just keep my blonde head low, or it would be blown off.